On that frigid winter night, an unexpected glow pierced the darkness of a desolate road in Connecticut. A driver, assuming it was just another forest fire, pulled over to help. Within seconds, the scene revealed a chilling truth. Amid the flames lay a human body, wrapped in plastic, blankets, and duct tape. What seemed at first like an accident quickly turned into one of the most cruel and disturbing crimes the small community had ever witnessed. But who was the victim? How could someone end up burned beyond recognition on a deserted roadside, far from any home or shelter? The answer to the first question came from the medical examiner. It was a young woman. The second, however, pointed to something far more sinister. This was no accident. The fire had not only destroyed life, but concealed a calculated, brutal execution. As firefighters extinguished the last flames, investigators realized the site wasn't the scene of the murder, only the dump site. The mutilations were horrifying. Nose, ears, fingers, and even skin from the lower back had been removed. This cruelty had a purpose: to erase every trace of identity. For authorities, the first battle was to give this nameless body a name. Forensic experts soon uncovered a vital clue. The missing skin suggested there had once been a tattoo. That detail led detectives to search databases for missing women with distinctive body art. In Connecticut, there were no matches. But when the search extended to neighboring states, one case from Long Island, New York, stood out. A 24-year-old woman recently reported missing, who had a butterfly tattoo on her lower back. This clue pointed directly to Rebecca Koster, a nursing assistant who had gone out with friends just hours earlier. The invisible thread of the investigation was beginning to unravel. Yet, final confirmation would come from something the fire could not erase: her teeth, the key to proving, without question, the identity of the young woman so brutally killed. Despite the horrific mutilations and the killer's clear intent to erase all signs of who the victim was, one mistake remained. By removing fingers, ears, and patches of skin, the murderer thought every chance of recognition was gone. But he overlooked what would become the key piece of evidence: the dental structure. Medical examiner Dr. Ira Kaner, a veteran of thousands of autopsies, explained that teeth are as valuable as fingerprints. Even in fires, the jawbone preserves unique features that allow for certain identification. This detail gave police the answer they desperately needed. Meanwhile, investigators combed through missing persons reports for a young woman who matched the profile. Early 20s, fair-skinned, and with a tattoo on her lower back. That was when the Long Island lead emerged. Rebecca Koster's family, worried by her sudden disappearance, had already filed a report. She was 24, worked as a nursing assistant, and was described by her parents as cheerful and dedicated. The confirmation came when her dental records were matched against the preserved teeth. The results were conclusive. The burned body found in Connecticut was Rebecca. It fell to the detectives to deliver the devastating news to her family. Upon hearing it, Rebecca's mother ran through the street in anguish, screaming that her daughter had been murdered. From that moment, the case was no longer a mystery without a name. It now had a story, a face, and a family demanding justice. Despite her young age, Rebecca Koster already carried adult responsibilities. She worked as a nursing assistant and helped support her household. Still, like any 24-year-old, she made time for fun. On the night she disappeared, she went out with her best friend Nicole and her new boyfriend, Dan. The group headed to a popular bar where they often relaxed after long weeks of work. Witnesses said Rebecca seemed cheerful that night. She chatted with friends, cracked jokes, and even texted her mother to reassure her that she was safe. For Barbara, her mother, this was comforting routine. Rebecca always checked in when she went out. But that night, The habit became one of their last exchanges. A little after 3:30 a.m., Rebecca was reportedly driven home by Dan and Nicole. Dan told police he walked her to the door and made sure she went inside. At first, his story seemed believable, but it raised the inevitable question: if Rebecca was home, how did she vanish just hours later? When she failed to show up for work, alarm bells went off. Barbara tried calling repeatedly, but Rebecca's phone went unanswered. Desperate, she reached out to Nicole, who claimed she knew nothing after dropping Rebecca off with Dan. As in any criminal investigation, the closest circle became the first focus. And inevitably, the boyfriend was put under suspicion. Brought in for questioning, Dan maintained his innocence. He even agreed to take a lie detector test, but the results were inconclusive, showing signs that he wasn't being completely truthful. Even so, police lacked hard evidence linking him to the crime. With no solid leads, investigators were forced to widen the scope of their search. To understand what had really happened to Rebecca after leaving the bar, investigators once again turned to Dr. Ira Kaner. Toxicology tests revealed no alcohol or drugs in her system, proving that she had been fully conscious during her final hours. Based on this, the medical examiner estimated that her death occurred roughly 4 hours after she was last seen. While not exact, this gave police a critical window. Something terrible had taken place between 3:30 and 7:30 a.m. That time frame not only narrowed the possibilities, but also pointed the investigation toward whoever had been in contact with her immediately after she returned home. When detectives examined her phone records, they discovered 2 calls from an unknown number with a 617 area code. The first, at 4:10 a.m., lasted about 15 minutes. The second, at 4:27, was much shorter, just 20 seconds. The timing was unsettling. Rebecca's last recorded phone activity matched the likely moment her killer made contact. Cell tower data added another layer of suspicion. The mystery caller's device had been moving toward Rebecca's home at that same time, suggesting that this person had come to pick her up. But the most disturbing detail was that the number wasn't linked to any official account. It was a prepaid burner phone, purchased anonymously to avoid tracing. From that moment on, investigators knew with painful certainty whoever was behind those calls was directly connected to Rebecca's death, and the 617 prefix was the first key to uncovering their identity. The autopsy further dismantled any theory of an accident. Although the fire had destroyed much of her skin and obscured external evidence, her internal organs revealed the truth. Her liver bore a stab wound, accompanied by a massive pool of blood inside the abdominal cavity. This meant she had been alive when stabbed, as hemorrhaging can only occur if the heart is still pumping. Additional cuts to her neck suggested further violent attacks, painting a picture of extreme cruelty. But there was still one critical question. Was Rebecca breathing when she was set on fire? The analysis of her lungs gave a definitive answer. No, there was no trace of soot in her airways, confirming that the fire had been started only after her death in an attempt to cover up the crime. Imaging tests revealed yet another crucial detail: the presence of air bubbles in her bloodstream. This indicated that at least one of the neck wounds had been inflicted while she was still alive. The air was drawn into her veins, traveled to her heart, and caused a fatal embolism. Taken together, the evidence was irrefutable. Rebecca had been murdered by multiple stab wounds to the liver and neck. Any notion of an accident was now impossible. To police, there was no longer any doubt. This was a cold-blooded, premeditated killing. With limited information about Rebecca's final hours, investigators returned to the starting point, the bar where she had spent the night. Reviewing the security footage, they saw her sitting alone at times while Dan and Nicole mingled with others. That's when a man, older than the typical crowd and dressed in a plain sweater, approached her. Unlike the young, carefree patrons around him, he seemed out of place. The footage even showed the two of them fiddling with their phones side by side, as if exchanging contact information. This raised an immediate red flag. Could he be the owner of the mysterious 617 number? As detectives revisited witness statements, a friend named Jennifer recalled something that suddenly seemed significant. She remembered the man being overly persistent, even intrusive. At one point, he grabbed her phone and, without permission, added his own number to her contacts. Jennifer described the encounter as uncomfortable and unsettling, noting his intimidating presence. When digital forensics combed through Rebecca's phone, the evidence aligned perfectly with Jennifer's account. A contact saved as J. Brown was linked to the same 617 number that had appeared in Rebecca's last calls. For the first time, a possible suspect began to emerge from the shadows. The challenge now was to uncover who J. Brown really was. The alias could easily be a mask, and the truth behind it might reveal someone far more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. Digital forensics proved decisive. The mysterious J. Brown, who had appeared in Jennifer's phone, was not who he claimed to be. Cross-checking the 617 number against investigative databases led experts to a damning conclusion. J was nothing more than an alias used by Evans Ganthier. This revelation came with another piece of undeniable evidence. Fingerprints were found on the duct tape used to wrap Rebecca's body. Against all odds, despite the fire, 2 thumbprints had survived on the adhesive. The database confirmed it. They belonged to Ganthier. For the first time, the investigation had a face, and police had a tangible suspect. Digging into Evans Ganthier's background, detectives discovered troubling patterns. While he had no major criminal record, there were disturbing red flags. He had been involved in domestic violence incidents and accused of exploiting his partner by forcing her into prostitution. He also had a habit of photographing women in his garage, further raising suspicions about his behavior. To strengthen the case, Jennifer was brought back to the station. When shown Ganthier's photo, she didn't hesitate. She immediately identified him as the man who had introduced himself as J. Brown and invaded her privacy at the bar that night. That confirmation erased all doubt. The shadowy figure who had lured Rebecca out of her home after those late-night calls now had a real name. The challenge was finding Evans Ganthier before he vanished, and gathering enough evidence to make sure the case would hold up in court. With Ganthier identified, investigators intensified the hunt. They knew he drove an SUV previously flagged for tickets and minor arrests, and that he was connected to a residence in the Bronx where his girlfriend lived. For days, surveillance teams rotated shifts in the neighborhood until they finally spotted the vehicle parked near the address. The next morning, detectives watched as Ganthier climbed into the SUV. That was when the arrest order was executed. Without resistance, he was taken into custody and brought to the precinct for interrogation. With the suspect secured, the investigation entered a new phase, confronting him and uncovering the extent of his role in Rebecca's death. Shortly after the arrest, Ganthier authorized police to search both his home and his vehicle. In the garage, investigators found suspicious signs: cleaning supplies, paint rollers, and evidence that the space had been recently scrubbed and repainted. While nothing tied the garage directly to Rebecca, it reeked of cover-up. The SUV, however, told a different story. Forensic teams detected reddish stains on the console near the driver's seat, dripping down toward the floorboard. Samples were collected and, days later, lab results delivered the devastating truth. It was Rebecca Koster's blood. This physical evidence shattered any claim of innocence. Investigators now had more than circumstantial suspicion. They had proof linking Ganthier to the victim. What remained was his explanation, which soon unraveled into a web of contradictions and desperate attempts to justify the unjustifiable. Faced with mounting evidence, Evans Ganthier decided to tell his side. In interrogation, he admitted meeting Rebecca at the bar and exchanging numbers. He claimed she had agreed to go home with him, but that during the drive, she suddenly became ill. According to his account, Rebecca began foaming at the mouth, as if suffering a seizure. He insisted that when they reached his garage, he tried to help by offering her water, but she stumbled over a pair of dumbbells, hit her head, and started bleeding heavily. He said he panicked, placed her in his SUV to take her to a hospital, but that she stopped breathing on the way. From there, he claimed he simply didn't know how to handle the situation. To explain the horrific acts that followed, Ganthier offered an even darker excuse. Consumed by fear of being blamed, he said he decided to conceal her identity. He admitted cutting off her fingers and ears, removing the skin from her lower back to erase her tattoo, buying gasoline, and setting her body ablaze on a Connecticut road. All, he claimed, to cover up what he described as an accident. But the forensic evidence destroyed his story. The medical report confirmed Rebecca had suffered no serious head injury and that her death was caused by multiple stab wounds. Blood found on the front console also contradicted his claim that she had never been in that seat. To detectives, his tale was nothing more than the desperate fabrication of a man cornered by overwhelming evidence, trying to downgrade murder into a tragic mishap followed by concealment. Science, however, was about to strip away every layer of his lie. Evans Ganthier's story might have sounded convincing to outsiders, but not to the experts. Dr. Ira Kaner re-examined Rebecca's body in detail and confirmed that there were no signs of head trauma whatsoever. No fractures, no internal bleeding, no injuries consistent with a fall over dumbbells. In contrast, the stab wounds to her liver and neck were undeniable. She had been violently attacked. The abdominal hemorrhage proved she was alive when her liver was pierced, and the air embolism caused by wounds to her neck confirmed at least one of those cuts was inflicted while she was still breathing. In other words, the accident never happened. Forensics proved that Rebecca's death was the result of multiple, deliberate, premeditated assaults. With this technical report, police dismantled every part of Ganthier's claims. The supposed fall he described had never occurred. The blood found on the SUV's front console further reinforced the violence inside the vehicle, directly contradicting his version of events. The mutilation of the body was not a panicked reaction, but a calculated, cold-blooded effort to erase evidence of murder. The medical examiner's findings, combined with the physical evidence, gave prosecutors the foundation they needed to file formal charges. Evans Ganthier would stand trial for second-degree murder. His lies would no longer shield him. Now, he would face a jury and Rebecca's devastated family in court. The trial lasted 4 grueling weeks, closely followed by Rebecca's family. Her mother, Barbara, attended every single session, determined to make sure her daughter's memory was honored and that justice prevailed. The courtroom heard painful testimony, the mutilations, the stab wounds, the fire that tried to erase it all. Each detail reopened the wound, yet it strengthened the family's resolve to remain present. To them, being in court was a way of standing beside Rebecca until the very end. The prosecution focused on tearing apart Ganthier's claims, pointing to the blood on the SUV console, the absence of head trauma, and a medical report proving fatal stab wounds. They warned the jury that if they accepted the defendant's story, he would escape a murder charge and face only evidence tampering, a far lighter sentence. After hours of arguments, silence filled the courtroom as the jury returned. In just over 5 hours of deliberation, the verdict was read: guilty of second-degree murder. Relief swept through the courtroom, though the grief remained. For Barbara and her family, there was no victory, only the bitter comfort that the man who destroyed Rebecca's life would not walk free. The judge imposed the maximum penalty, 25 years to life in prison, with the possibility of parole only after the minimum term. The sentence not only punished Ganthier, but sent a message: cruelty like his would not be minimized. The void left by Rebecca could never be filled, but justice, at least, had been served. The conviction brought a collective sigh of relief across Long Island and nearby Stonington, Connecticut, where Rebecca's body had been discovered. It was a mixture of closure and sorrow. Barbara described the moment not as a victory, but as a burden lifted. Her daughter's killer would not walk the streets again. Yet, the absence of Rebecca was still unbearable. Friends and family reminded everyone that no verdict could bring back her vibrant energy, her easy laughter, or the future so cruelly stolen. The trial ensured, however, that she would not be erased by silence. In the aftermath, Rebecca's story took on a deeper meaning. It became a painful reminder of how vulnerable anyone can be, even in seemingly safe environments. For police and forensic experts, the case was a testament to the power of science in exposing lies. For her family, it became a call to keep her memory alive. Barbara admitted she could never forgive Ganthier, but she vowed that Rebecca's name would live on, remembered as a young woman who dedicated her life to caring for others. Though her voice was silenced, her legacy would continue to echo in every story told about her kindness. Justice did not erase the pain, but it ensured that the murderer could not harm again. The conviction proved that even in the face of cruelty, truth can survive the flames. The same fire meant to erase Rebecca's identity ultimately lit the path to revealing the crime and preserving her memory. Enjoyed this case? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more true crime stories like this. Drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We love seeing how far our stories travel. Hit the like button to support our work and share this video with fellow true crime fans.